everybody, and welcome to this episode of iCast Fireball presents the Cosmere Crunch Squad. Yes, This week we're doing another Crunch Squad. The holidays, again, were very full of scheduling conflicts, so you get to, me and Ned come at you with another Crunch Squad here, where we talk about a different type of scene in the Cosmere RPG. But first, my name is Thomas, the DM for the Stonewalkers campaign. I'm joined by...
Ned. I am the Crunch Squad Master.
Lore Master, Crunch Squad Master, maybe not Lore Master here for the Cosmere.
Yeah, it's
though.
a bit of a reversal in that regard.
Yes, that's true. Very true. But yes, Crunch Squad Master regardless. We're going to be talking about another scene type. Last time we talked about endeavors. If you want to know more about those, very fun, crunchy mechanics, you can go look at our last episode. But this episode, what are we talking about, Ned?
We're talking about conversations. Imagine that. Talking about conversing. This is our third kind of scene pillar. We got combat, we got endeavors, and now we've got conversations. And the moment when you want to bring these into your session is pretty self-explanatory. It's when there is a sort of high stakes, not necessarily high stakes in the sense of like high emotions, but just like you're having a negotiation with somebody, you're speaking, you want something, they want something, and you want to raise the stakes on it.
So now, if I may, Ned, the question people might be asking about conversations is like, isn't it just role playing at this point? Isn't this type of scene type just a role playing exercise here? Like, what makes it different than just traditional role playing?
Yeah, you can use these kind of at your wish based on like how much of a stamp you want to put on the moment. Like most conversations, most interactions, if it's just like a single like back and forth with an NPC, you can probably just roll a single skill check and be done with it. This is for more in-depth stuff. Like some of the examples that it gives of conversations you might have would be inquiries where you're trying to get information from somebody, a negotiation where you're bargaining, a scheme where you're trying to pull the wool over somebody else's eyes. And there are actually sections for inquiries, negotiations, schemes, and then just general social conversations. And each of those has a little call-out box for the GM of example opportunities and complications you might be able to bring in for each of those.
Okay. But it seems to have this heightened status to it, state to it, right?
Yeah.
Like I like how you put it. You're raising the stakes, but more than just a single die roll. You're raising the stakes of a scene above from basic role play to something higher that could influence the narrative more drastically one way or another, right?
Yeah, there's generally an idea of, well, in fact, in the book where it talks about setting the scene, the first thing you want to start doing is considering objectives. Typically, when you want to bring a conversation mechanically into bear is when there is like a specific, meaningful objective going on. An example that comes to mind for me from some of the campaigns we've done here on iCast Fireball is the Council of Waterdeep, where all of these factions come together and they're trying to convince all of these powerful individuals, all these powerful factions to gather together for one purpose, to pool their resources. This is why you should be spending your resources on our cause instead of just doing your own thing.
For our listeners, a good example from the books, if you haven't listened to ICF Campaign 1, I would say probably an equivalent is when Shallan first gets to the war camps in Words of Radiance, and she has to try to ingratiate herself with all of this knowledge from Yasna, but not having Yasna there to back her up, and trying to get in with the Kolins and also Sabariel. So that might be another opportunity, like Shallan would be a single party member in a conversation trying to, that her objective would be pretty clear at that point.
Mm-hmm. And when you get into those, like when you say, okay, we're in a conversation, this is kind of a heightened moment, as far as sort of an initiative per se, it's really very flexible, even more flexible than like we talked about with endeavors. You could just let the conversation flow naturally, but there is also some attention given to making sure that everybody who wants to be in on the conversation has their place to speak. So you could bring in a bit more of a structured initiative system, make sure everybody's able to contribute one at a time. The book also does specifically call out that if somebody doesn't want to be involved in the conversation, they don't have to. You can just cut them out of the initiative entirely.
Okay, sounds good. So, like, at this point, you have to be more aware of beats rather than, 10-second rounds, right? Or a minute round at that point. Whatever it may be. And I would imagine, and I'm looking in the handbook here, page 315, 316. I imagine that those who don't want to join the conversation might find a narrative way to come back to the conversation if it continues on after a period of time, similar to combat of like, oh, I don't want to do a fast turn. Actually, now I do want to do a fast turn. Things like that, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And there are different ways that you can contribute to a scene. Maybe you don't necessarily want to be doing the talking, but you have some other ideas for how you might help.
Because like the barbarian, the warrior might be really bad at talking, and if they aren't a duelist where they can go from different katas, which we see in Christian's character, how are they going to contribute, right? Like, how can I contribute to this conversation? I'm not a wordy person.
Yeah, so there are a few different what they call contributions in the terminology of the RPG. But to kind of build a baseline before we get to the specific contributions, I want to talk about how focus is used in conversations.
Yes. This is the big one of the big mechanical things that differentiates it away from just basic roleplay. Yeah,
because you have focus constantly is a resource you can spend on all sorts of things, and the way that the conversation is typically going to work from a structural standpoint is the player characters are trying to break down the NPCs, essentially. The way that we're doing that is we're generally going to be like making some skill checks, trying to persuade them to see your side of the argument. And the resource that the NPC has to kind of resist that, because you don't want to just convince the NPC in one single good check and then the conversation's over. That's not very dramatic. What you can do in response to failing a check against a persuasive argument from another person is you can spend focus to resist. And depending on how well structured the argument is, or maybe how well the roll goes, the GM has the prerogative to say, if it's just a reasonably persuasive argument, the opponent must spend 2 focus to remain resolute. And if an argument is extremely strong, the opponent must spend 4 focus instead.
Ooh,
so
this is fun.
Yeah, this is the kind of structure of the argument then is depending on how many NPCs you have on the opposing side and how strong those NPCs are. Because NPCs, I haven't actually looked at like the stat blocks for the foes in Stormlight, but they'll generally have some pool of focus that kind of scales depending on how big of a deal they are.
Yeah, how on their tier specifically, and it's absolutely good. What I really like about this at the table overall is if everybody at the table is aware of this type of mechanic of like resisting influence. There's also the next paragraph Ned read here on page 317. The last paragraph said, if the GM decides the argument is incredibly persuasive or hits on a topic, the NPC might choose not to resist at all. And so understanding this, like the structured of like, hey, that's a good argument. Hey, 2 focus, 4 focus is, hey, that's really good for this specific person. It could be a clue into the players of like, hey, you've hit a nerve. Like, this is a really like a meaningful thing that you've touched on, or just completely not resisting at all, being like, whoa. Like, it can help drive the narrative decisions at the table, understanding how the mechanics are supposed to interact and how the GM's supposed to have that back and forth as well. So that's kind of like a fun, in improv we call that game within a game, right? Like underneath the surface, like ooh, the players like that was really cool that I had to do 4 focus to resist that, or being like, I can't resist because I don't have 4 focus type of a situation. And so it'll give you a direction as well.
Yeah, and unlike something like hit points, for example, where it's like, okay, you have to burn through all their hit points until you've defeated them, it's always the NPC's prerogative to decide whether they want to resist and spend their focus or not. So if you just make a really, really good argument, if you touch on something that is really important to the NPC that maybe you didn't even know about, then that can cut through much more quickly.
Right, and the last thing I'll say about this is we think about opportunities and complications, right? Because like even though that this conversations we're using focus is a way of raising the stakes, when die roll is actually raising the stakes, or you roll natural 20, you get an opportunity and a complication. There's a danger of like if your GM doesn't make you lose focus, or if the adversaries don't lose focus, then what good is an opportunity in a conversation like that? Other than influencing the narrative, right? Well, you can gain a focus point back when you get an opportunity, right? So that's another mechanical draw to find opportunities to use your focus and to use it as a plentiful or sometimes scarce resource like that. It adds that extra layer to the mechanics of the game overall.
Yeah, and to the idea of, the players also have their own focus, but there are some comments about player characters and influence. This is something that I've run into a lot in D&D, this idea that, it's like, okay, I'm going to try and persuade this other player to go to my side of the argument, and so you roll a persuasion check against them, but there's not a DC, and so it just kind of ends up being this sort of like, okay, player, do you feel persuaded or not? This question of maintaining the player character's agency for how their character would respond. And so a couple particular sentences that I just want to call out from the book in the interest of maintaining player agency. The way you roleplay these situations is up to you, and you're never forced to choose between spending focus and making your character believe or do something that doesn't fit their story. Or even if you're completely out of focus, this never forces your character to do or believe something that you disagree with. You can have your character change their mind if you wish, but it's up to you to decide what the effects are and how this impacts the story.
And I like that too. It also, at that same page 318, it talks about characters when you don't have any focus, right? And just says, hey, a good option if you're out of focus, a good solution to this, especially if you're like, this conversation isn't going to change my mind or belief system, is just be like, hey, maybe narratively you just walk away. Right? Maybe you remove yourself from the conversation, and that could be a nice narrative thing of like, oh, I have to leave because, and like, what does it do to me internally, or like what that turmoil, right? Like it adds that extra just option to you to where you don't have to give in because the dice say so.
Yeah.
Right?
I think that's one of the nice things about the idea of having focus as a resource in general is it gives you a way to direct your roleplay in response to running out of focus. It's like, okay, if my character doesn't have any focus left in this moment, what emotionally is that going to do to them?
Right. I mean, it's very clear we love the system just wholeheartely. I just love how it is called focus, because it is that extra like it's very informative to the players, that being like, oh yeah, like I've lost focus, and then it helps influence your decisions, as you just put. I really like how you put that.
Yeah. Speaking of influence, another thing I want to talk about is the specific mechanical term, a character that you can influence. That's something it calls out in this chapter. Hey. This is very similar to like in D&D. If you look at a spell description, it will say, target a creature that you can see. It's a very specific terminology there, where if you can't see the creature, you can't cast the spell on them. It's similar in Stormlight that we have a lot of abilities that are maybe on your heroic path or maybe your radiant path if you choose one of those talents. Yeah. You will occasionally see that it will specifically say a character that you can influence. And so to get very, very crunchy about it, to influence someone, you must be able to communicate with them, which generally requires them to sense you or otherwise receive information from you. If an ability affects a character you can influence, it refers to a character who you can communicate with in an appropriately effective manner.
Yes.
And then we get kind of even deeper into the mechanical effects of some of these abilities that specifically say a creature you can influence. So there is, even outside of a conversation, you typically still have access to the resist influence ability that you can spend focus on. So
yes,
if you have... So there's a couple different kind of classes of terminologies it talks about. If you have an ability that you use on a character and it specifically says a character that you can influence, that means that the character can resist it by spending 2 focus as if they were resisting a successful persuasion skill roll.
Oh, interesting.
But in instances where a talent doesn't have that terminology in it, it's assumed that it cannot be resisted. Oh, pardon me.
Hello, Strahd. Oh,
yes,
Strahd.
This is my vampire, Count Strahd von Zarovich. He has graced us with his presence for just a moment. Yes, so if it doesn't say a character that you can influence, it's assumed that it cannot be resisted. But then there's also kind of another sort of outlier where there are some abilities that aren't necessarily persuasive in scope, but they will still call out on occasion that it can be resisted as if it was a persuasion thing. The example that it specifically calls out in the book is the scholar's keen insight talent. This is about gaining knowledge about somebody else. It's not about trying to persuade them, but it still can be resisted by spending 2 focus.
That's really cool. I didn't know that terminology. I was not aware of that. To be able to, and in combat, focus becomes very critical, right? Like that's a very plentiful, good resource. Unless you're like Christian's character, where you're just so cultivated, you have 5 focus at all times, right? And you can just use them whenever. That can be really detrimental for the GM. To have to spend your focus when you're like, I was hoping to do 2 attacks because there's only 3 people here, or I was hoping to charge and things like that. Something I should call out as well, because we're kind of talking about mixing of the scenes here, right? Like conversations is a scene and then combat is a different scene, but conversation is one of the loosey-goosey scenes, right? It is a third scene type. Endeavor, conversation, combat, but conversations seem to be able to happen in other scenes as well, right? Like it could be on its own, but it could also be in an endeavor, or it could also be in a combat. A great example, if you want to see an actual play, I think Brotherwise, when this was released, I wish I had the link here. Maybe we'll drop it below. They did the level 5 tier 2 one-shot called Speak the Words. And in it, one of the characters, as a free action, they bantered, right? And they were a singer, and they were going against some adversarial singers. And so they bantered, and they said something really profound. And so the GM was like, ooh, that really strikes them. They're going to both spend 2 focus to resist your influence, to make sure that they can keep fighting in this combat. And I was like, whoa, like, what? Like that to me, that it's such a break from the TTRPGs I'm used to, the 5e, where it's like, nope, you're in combat, you have hit points, you have your AC, and that melding and that flexibility was just so freeing to see in this instance of being like, yeah, if you're trying to, and it really, I'm not even finishing a sentence because it was just so revolutionary, right? But essentially, like, I love how that flexibility makes me feel like the players really can start to do anything they want to conceive. That's always the promise of D&D, of like, you can do anything when you first learn how to play, and then you're like, actually, you can't fly because you don't have a fly speed, and this and that. But here, just that's one step towards true freedom for the player to do what they want. And there is a mechanical rule built into it.
Yeah, another step towards preventing hit points from being the end-all, be-all with all interaction.
Right? Absolutely. And where you're forced to be on a grid for every single type of encounter or combat, right? Absolutely.
Yeah.
No. Oh, that's so cool, though. I didn't know that abilities and like paths that had the influence keyword could then be considered like resisting that influence, just like in a conversation. That's incredible.
Yeah, so GMs always keep that in mind. Your NPCs always have access to spend 2 focus points to resist being influenced.
I will try to remember that.
And then,
but there are different types of conversation types as well that they give in the player's handbook here. No, sorry, not the player's handbook, just the handbook in general.
Yeah.
A lot of different types. I have to imagine this is more of like an ideation, meaning it's more of like the beginning of like just saying like, here are some ideas, and we've statted out some of these. But I have to feel like they're kind of giving permission to GMs to be like, hey, if you find a different type of conversation, go for it, right? I mean, you get that feeling when you read through this as well?
I feel like it's mostly just kind of like to sort of prime the pump for the GM to be like, okay, depending on what type of situation you're in, this is what the stakes are for the conversation. This is kind of the objective we're moving towards. And then also these tables that give you inspiration for opportunities and complications that you can bring in for this specific type of interaction.
Yeah, because they give 4 types in the handbook itself, right? I mean, the first one, we'll just read, each of them. The first one's inquiry, the second is negotiation, the third is scheme, and then the fourth and final one is social, right? And so those are the ones that they give you permission and be like, hey, this is what you could do. This is what we statted out. There is, for inquiry, actually for each one of these, there is an opportunity and complication table with possibilities that you can then use when an opportunity or complication arises. And the reason why there isn't more really is because it just defaults back to the resisting influences 2 focus or 4 focus or not resisting influence at all, basically. Am I right there, Ned?
Yeah, I personally as a GM would look at this situation not so much as a set in stone, this is how to run these specific types of conversations, but as an inspiration for how to keep it kind of free form, because that's how conversations are. They are kind of by nature pretty free form.
Right, and this might be the, now that I'm thinking about it, this could be a nerve-wracking type of scene for maybe new GMs, right? Like this of the 3, this is probably the flexibility and the loosey-goosey of it. I'll call it the improv of this might be more intimidating for GMs. Ned, what do you feel like would be good advice for those that are intimidated to implement or go 110% into conversations and to try some things out? What would be a good suggestion for some of those people?
If you want to just add as much structure as you feel like you want to help keep it flow. I remember when I first played Fate, which is the game we play very often over on Improv Tabletop, moving to that from a very D&D kind of mindset, it is tricky to kind of reset your brain to be like, oh, wait, there's not like a specific rule for every kind of interaction. You don't go to the rule book to see what happens when you are trying to fire from the back of a horse. You just you just kind of go with the flow and say, okay, well, what makes sense? It's weird that there is kind of that mental block, but it is there. So if you need to add structure to the system in order to make yourself feel more comfortable with running it, then do so. But remember that you can always kind of pare that back as well as you go further.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Like, add the structure you feel you need, and be ready to deviate from it if need be. But you'd very least have that blueprint in front of you to always go back to if things do get a little more too uncomfortable or too I don't know where to go from here. You can always go right back. Preparation just in general for the GM is the best cure for fear or wanderiness in GMing. I will also shout out not only Stonewalkers, but the World Guide, which the World Guide has the adversaries, a majority of the adversaries in the Stormlight universe. They have in each NPC block, whether it be in an adventure or in the stat block for the enemy, I believe for the enemies, they have motivation for each of these NPCs, which I find incredibly a breath of fresh air as a GM, being like, oh, I know what this NPC's goal is. I know what their motivation is. Therefore, when a conversation happens, I know what they are going to try to achieve. I have a direction. I have a heading, if you will. And so for someone who maybe is a little bit more experienced, sometimes that is enough to kind of inform you like, hey, this is how the conversation's going to go, right? As long as you stick to this, they're not going to give this up very easily. It's going to drive most of their decisions. And that can lead to very interesting things as you improv, right? But you still have a base that you can go back to. Yeah,
though there are some ways that players might be able to kind of weasel some of that information out. So now that we've set kind of like the baseline for what's kind of mechanically unique about conversations, how to use focus and whatnot, let's talk about the final thing, I believe, contributions. These are kind of like the specific actions that you will take as part of this conversation. So the most straightforward one, influence a person. This is you are out there making the arguments, you're being the face of the group, you are talking, and so typically what you'll do is based off of the argument that you're making, the GM will ask you to make a skill test with a DC equal to the spiritual or cognitive defense of the NPC, depending on what skill used. The GM might increase or decrease the DC. You might gain advantage or disadvantage based on your approach. But then the idea being that if you succeed on this argument, then it is up to the GM to decide whether the NPC is going to spend focus to resist and keep going with the conversation, or whether they're going to bow out.
Doesn't it make so much more sense that the DC is based off of the defense of the character rather than a random roll? Like in a traditional TTRPG of like, all right, they're going to roll to try to resist you, which isn't really a thing anyway, but a lot of DMs want to make it be a contested charisma roll, and somehow they roll a natural 20 and the bard rolls a 1. Isn't it just so much nicer to be like, no, it's just whatever has prepared them for this moment in their life, spiritually or mentally or even physically, right? It just makes so much more sense.
Yeah. So this is like the most straightforward way to get through the conversation, but some other cool options that we have for, maybe the barbarian who's doing their kata off to the side, some things that they might be able to do. One option is to help or hinder efforts. This is not a tested ability or contribution. You just go in there, you say something that either you think will help your friend to make a better argument or will hinder your opponent, kind of throw them off their balance, and then the person that you are helping, your ally, will gain advantage or give the opposition disadvantage on their next test in the conversation.
So if you're not good with conversation, you could bump into the server on purpose and have them spill their hors d'oeuvres on the ground, causing a clatter and throwing off the person being interviewed or what am I trying to say? Grilled, and give your ally advantage. That's fun.
Yeah. In a similar vein, there is bolster an ally. We talked about, maybe what might happen if a player loses all of their focus in a conversation. Well, you can encourage, reassure, or otherwise bolster another person in the conversation, which can give them back a point of focus.
There you go. Nice. I like that. And that's a very narratively, makes a lot of narrative sense. I think our own Stonewalkers campaign of like how Josh's character is very influenced by, Mickey, and how she's doing a lot of the bolstering, a lot of the encouraging, very envoy path as well for Resh and I, and so it makes sense.
Yeah. Next up, we've got gather information, which if you're kind of off to the sidelines, maybe you're looking at this person who's being grilled, trying to figure out, okay, well, what's their secret motivation? What do they really want? Like you said, each of those stat blocks is going to come with a built-in motivation. So this is your opportunity to maybe try and get some insight into that person. You roll your skill check, and then if you succeed, you can gain some of that information from the GM, or the NPC might just give you the information outright. And then you can take this information, relay it back to the person who's doing the argument, and now that they have a straighter tactic to attack with, maybe their next argument is so good that the opponent will have to spend 4 focus instead of just 2 focus, because they really get to the heart of it.
Yeah, because it's really directed, and I can see situations once you get to tier 2 and multiple people have Spren, right? And using the Spren capabilities of sending them to secretly speak to the person who is interrogating or having this conversation, so the other person doesn't hear or know, and so it's as if a little bird is whispering in their ear. Yeah, I can see a lot of fun narrative situations there.
Yeah, and then the final contribution is interject flavor. You can always interject to add flavor or context to a conversation. These contributions have no rules. They're just part of the fun of role-playing.
Word for word read from the handbook. I love that. They also give examples of how Persuasion, deception, leadership, intimidation, insight, or deduction might actually be used. Perception, of course, and when to test it. For instance, leadership, which I'm still figuring out the big difference between leadership and persuasion. Leadership being inspiring someone to follow their better nature, so like a call to action, right? As opposed to persuasion, which is just using raw charm to convince someone to act against their better judgment, like maybe a little bit of seduction there versus, just like a call for morality. But yeah, really fun. I really appreciate how there are examples throughout the entire handbook for every single scene, basically, of what you can do and what are some examples of when to do a certain skill.
And it's definitely flexible enough in the sense of we've got 7 skills listed here with examples of how you could use them in a conversation. Chances are you're decent at least one of those skills.
Right, exactly. Like you're going to be decent one of them. And although, yes, you're not maybe going to do a light or heavy weapon skill test in a conversation, but every single one of these you most likely will be able to use at some point or another. I actually just looked at the opportunity and complication table that they have under this section, and under complications, speaking about Spren, says if you get a complication, your radiant Spren could possibly get distracted by something and not be able to be that messenger anymore in this particular conversation. Just funny how there's already this thought of everybody can try to interact and help with each other. And a complication could be, oh no, some chink in the communication line gets severed for a short time. So.
Yeah. And I believe that's all of the mechanical stuff going into it. It mostly does come down again to how you use your focus, how you use your abilities that specifically can influence, and then whether you're the person who's doing the direct conversation or whether you're trying to assist that person who's doing the direct conversation.
Yeah, and as same with the endeavors scenes that we talked about on page 321 here, there is a full-blown snippet from an actual, from an actual session with the GM going back and forth with a couple players on a conversation itself and it playing out, which I always find is great inspiration as well, especially with a new scene type, like a conversation. I'll be referring to this in my games, most likely, moving forward. That's pretty much it. Really fun way to think about how this can be injected into just every single part of the campaign that we're running with Stonewalkers in general, and how that flexibility gives so much possibility as we move forward.
Indeed.
Well, folks, thanks for joining. Ned, thank you for being our crunch master, of course, and that role reversal, as you put it, instead of the lore master here. But thank you for joining, of course. And everybody, that's it for us this week. Just want to let you know again that we will be coming back, hopefully in the next 2 weeks, with an actual episode of the Stonewalkers campaign. So tune in there to see us and see what we do on the Shattered Plains if you're current. And if you're not current, you can go back and binge those episodes and then be ready for what we do on the Shattered Plains in 2 weeks. So join us there. If you like what we're doing here on the channel, you can leave a subscribe. You can subscribe, leave a like, leave a comment below on other unique ways that you can interact with the conversation. Maybe you can drop a suggestion on what skill you would use in a particular conversation and what you've gone to before. But as always, you can always reach out to us at icastfireball2020@gmail.com or go to our patreon.com/icastfireball20 and you can chat with us on the daily through our Patreon exclusive Discord if you join that $5 a month tier. We talked about Improv Tabletop going to Ned. He's our sister podcast running it over there as the GM. They have a really fun, creative, sometimes wacky, ongoing Lego campaign that they've got going on over there using the Bump in the Dark TTRPG system, which is powered by the Apocalypse, right? Or Blades in the Dark?
It is Forged in the Dark, which is, some might argue, a spinoff of Powered by the Apocalypse. It's all one big happy family.
There you go. A favorite over there. It's real fun. It's delving into horror without getting too gross or grotesque as well. So you might dip your toes into that. And don't forget to leave them a 5-star review on the way out. But lastly, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with your friends and fellow wacky adventurers. But until next time, I'm Thomas, your GM. And around the table we have...
I'm Ned. I do all of our stuff.
Let's brave the storms, everybody. Speak the ancient oaths, and we'll see you all next time.